Everyone thinks Nietzsche is the philosopher of power, the champion of strength, the enemy of weakness. But is that the entire truth? In this video, we will explore a hidden Nietzschean truth about who really wins in the grand struggle of life. For most people, Nietzsche is all about power, the will to power, the Übermensch, the idea that life is a battlefield and only the strong survive. Most scholars say that for Nietzsche, power is the highest value, whether it's political power, domination over others, or ethical power, the realization of one's own potential. Nietzsche is seen as the great champion of strength. But Nietzsche himself gives a clue that this isn't the whole story. In Twilight of the Idols, he writes, "It pays dearly to come to power. Power stupefies." What does that mean? Why would Nietzsche, the philosopher of strength, say that power dulls the mind? The answer lies in something most people miss, something hidden deep in his philosophy, a force that, despite being overlooked, holds the key to how the weak win. In nature, mimicry is a survival strategy, where a harmless creature evolves to look like a toxic one, fooling predators into leaving them alone. But what if I told you that Nietzsche believed humans do the same thing? Nietzsche first mentions mimicry in Daybreak, and it appears throughout his later works, The Gay Science, On the Genealogy of Morality, and Twilight of the Idols. However, Nietzsche doesn't just see mimicry as a survival tool for the weak. He sees it as a weapon that can be turned against the powerful. According to Nietzsche, power doesn't just make the strong indifferent to change, it makes them hostile to it. The strong become complacent, convinced of their own superiority. Meanwhile, the weak, because they must, become masters of adaptation. The weak learn the habits, values, and weaknesses of the powerful, and through transformative mimicry, they use that knowledge against them. Nietzsche's best example, the slave revolt in morality. How did the weak, the so-called slaves, overcome the noble aristocrats? By taking the nobles' own morality and turning it against them. The weak redefined strength itself, making humility, patience, and suffering into virtues. The noble, proud of their self-mastery, didn't see it coming. They accepted these new values, unknowingly submitting to the morality of those they once ruled. It's worth noting that Christianity did not abolish the cruelty enshrined in the values of its Greek and Roman predecessors. Rather, it reinterpreted and redeployed cruelty. But that's just the beginning. Mimicry reveals a fatal flaw in power. The strong don't see the weak coming. The noble aristocrats believed they were superior, but they had no idea how well the so-called slaves understood them. The weak didn't just copy the noble values, they exaggerated them, twisting them into a weapon. It's an old truism that knowledge is power. The inverse, that power is often ignorance, is rarely discussed. The noble was outplayed. Power stupefied them. Nietzsche's theory of mimicry doesn't just explain the past, it tells us something about how power works today. Revolution isn't always a sudden overthrow. Often it's a process of repetition with a difference, where the oppressed use the values of the oppressors against them. There are numerous modern-day examples where oppressed groups have used the values of their suppressors against them, often employing irony, mimicry, and strategic adaptation to overturn dominant power structures. Feminists have often used market-driven rhetoric to push for gender equality. While early feminist movements were dismissed as ideological or emotional, activists began arguing that gender equality is profitable, a framing that capitalist societies could not ignore. The gender pay gap debate has shifted from a moral argument to an economic one. Corporations are now pressured to include women in leadership because studies show diversity improves financial performance. Women's rights activists played on corporate greed rather than appealing to morality. By proving that diversity increases revenue, they turn capitalism against itself. Opponents of same-sex marriage often frame marriage as a traditional, sacred institution. LGBTQ activists use this very logic to argue that if marriage is so vital, then denying it to the same-sex couples was an attack on family values. Legal battles for same-sex marriage in the US often cited principles of religious freedom, personal liberty, and family protection, the same arguments conservatives had used to defend heterosexual marriage. LGBTQ activists did not challenge the value of marriage, they embraced it, forcing conservatives to either contradict their own rhetoric or concede defeat. This raises an important question. If power is a trap, what does that mean for those seeking to overthrow it? So, what is the advantage of the weak? It's knowledge. The weak, because they must navigate the world dominated by the strong, understand the powerful better than the powerful understand themselves. The weak are forced to observe, adapt, and exploit vulnerabilities. The powerful, in contrast, become blind in their arrogance. They assume their rule is natural, inevitable, and that assumption leads to their downfall. The weak win, not by brute force, but by knowing the game better than the strong ever could. To get a deeper understanding of Nietzsche's master-slave morality, check out this video